The Secrets of Middle-earth is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth, where we discuss the hidden themes and deeper layers found in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whether in his writings or in any of the media derived from them. And we wanted to say happy early Mother's Day to all the moms out there. I'm Jeff Haecker, and joining me today are Kaitlyn Fascista. Hi, Kaitlyn, and happy Mother's Day.
Hi, thank you.
And Thomas Salerno. Hi, Thomas.
Hey, Jeff.
And Thomas Sanjurjo. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Jeff.
All right. Well, today we will be discussing a very upcoming and prescient topic of Mother's Day. But before we do that, we wanted to say to be sure to follow The Secrets of Middle-earth in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or in any podcast directory or app. And you can find us on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or on Twitter, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. Today's, as I mentioned, is a Mother's Day special. So again, happy Mother's Day to Kaitlyn and all the mothers out there. And we'll be discussing the amazing mothers and mother figures of Tolkien's Legendarium. But before we kind of get into that, I was thinking, and I think Thomas, you brought this up, of discussing Tolkien's mom, because there's kind of a recurring theme that you mentioned. So I know we kind of in our Tolkien's faith, we discussed his mom's conversion from her previous faith to Catholicism and how that kind of inspired him. But I wanted to just open it up. Did anyone have anything they wanted to say about Tolkien's mom? I think Thomas, as I mentioned, you kind of brought this up, so I'll let you go ahead if you have anything.
Oh, right. We were talking about this in our document, right? Yeah. So it's interesting because there's this recurring theme in the Legendarium, it seems to me, of people losing mothers. They talk about Faramir lost his mother at a young age. Frodo lost both his parents at a young age. And I remember in The Tale of Aragorn and Arwen, there's a very moving scene where Aragorn meets his mother for the last time. And so I just noticed this recurring theme, and I wondered if perhaps it was Tolkien kind of reflecting his own life and his work, because he lost his own mother while he was still young. And it wasn't long after her conversion to Catholicism. And I know, I believe in the best known biography of Tolkien that's out there, they mention how much of an influence losing his mother had on him. And I just wondered if maybe that's why that theme is so prominent in the Legendarium. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it definitely influences it a lot. You see both. It's interesting because you don't see parents very often in The Lord of the Rings. You see many father figures, and you do see many men who are very influential. And the women who are very influential tend to be very distant. Like, they don't tend to be as caring as you would normally consider mothers to be, which is odd. It's a change from a lot of fantasy fiction where you'll tend to see more matronly characters that care for the the adventurers when they're stuck, and they bolster them and lift them up. And like, the only really indication we get of that is Galadriel. And when we do get Galadriel, it's more in a sense of like terror and awe, not really not really like this completely concerned doting mother, but like, you don't really want to step the wrong way inside of her kingdom, because this is not going to go well for you.
Yeah, very true. It's something I hadn't really thought about before, and it's kind of, and yeah, you're definitely right. It kind of continues, and then kind of by the end of Return of the King, it kind of resolves itself, because, or I guess rather in the appendices, because you see Arwen we don't see much of her, but we do kind of see her becoming a mom and being happy for a long time as a mom. And then at the end of Return of the King, and then in the appendices, you see Sam and his wife, Rosie, and who we assume is a good mom, hopefully. We don't know much about their relationship, but we can probably assume that it's kind of happy. So it kind of, now that the great evil is ended, they can, there's space for kind of the goodness of motherhood to kind of flourish. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on this, Kaitlyn.
Yeah, I've kind of just been reflecting on it. And I do think it's interesting that we don't see a lot of um, like doting mothers, like kind of what you had mentioned before. Like um, Tolkien doesn't really get into that aspect of the family life. We see a lot more of like mothers giving advice to their daughters as they're growing older, like in the story of Aldarion and Arendis. Arendis's mother is giving her advice, and then Arendis is kind of raising her own daughter. Um, but at least in that case, she's not really what you would want to aspire to as a mother. So I think it's interesting. Like, it's hard to really point to many of the mothers in the story as like role models, if that makes sense. And I think that I imagine a lot of that comes from Tolkien having lost his mother and not really having a lot to go off of from his own personal perspective. And it's almost like you can maybe see him like fleshing out different possible paths that mothers could take, or effects that they could have on the story as it's going. But there isn't a lot of that like warm, fuzzy, like cuddly, happy moment kind of motherhood like you think about on Mother's Day. It's a lot more real and like difficult and strained, and I don't know. It's almost more realistic in that way because life is hard, especially in Middle Earth. And
Yeah.
when you've got the Dark Lord Sauron messing everything up, children are dying and families are being separated. So it's kind of interesting the way it all plays out in his stories.
Yeah, very well said. Well, unless anybody had anything else to say about his mom, I just thought we could briefly touch on his wife, Edith. I did try to look up some stuff and I couldn't really find too much about her as a mother. But if anybody knows anything, feel free to, you can speak up about it, because I didn't find much, but I did find this quote, and I'm not sure if this is from a biography or just something from Humphrey Carpenter, but he did say that she and the professor delighted to discuss and mull over every detail of the lives of their children and later their grandchildren. So it seems like she was they were great, very much in love, and it seems like she was, would have been a great partner and mother for their children and a great grandmother. So, but if anybody knows anything, has any more details or anything, feel free to bring it up here. Because again, I couldn't find too much about it without like checking out a biography and reading from it too much. So.
Yeah, I think that's really sweet that we don't really have a ton of information about her. And I don't know if maybe she was just more of a private person and didn't want a lot of it out in the public. So I definitely like want to value the Tolkien family privacy, within their own family. But it's true, like what we have heard of her, she does seem like she was a loving wife and mother.
Yeah, and given how much detail Tolkien himself put into the lives of his children, to the point of like writing those very extravagant and detailed Father Christmas letters, that quote that you read, Jeff, definitely, I think, rings true of what we know about that family and their family life.
Yeah, and from a little bit I read too, it seemed like she was, when they were at Oxford, she was kind of the professor's wife and was kind of playing, that was kind of her role in the family and in kind of Oxford society. And then at one point, I think after he kind of retired, they moved, I forget where exactly they moved, but they kind of moved away from that, and she could kind of become more of a socialite, or more of not being the professor's wife, but being herself. So, but again, I didn't see much, how that came about, or how much did that really apply to motherhood, but just something I thought. But well, thanks for that. And yeah, I guess we can go ahead and jump on to the kind of the main point of our discussion, which was mothers in the Legendarium. And I thought we could kind of start by going around and everyone mentioning their favorite. And since we only have one mother on the podcast, I figure we can start with Kaitlyn. So go ahead, Kaitlyn. Who is your favorite mother in Tolkien or in the Legendarium?
Sure. And I almost feel kind of bad because I feel like when you think of Mother's Day, you want to do like a really uplifting, kind of flowery sort of discussion. But like I said before, like you just don't really get that with Tolkien. And as I was trying to think of like who my favorite mother would be or who I would want to highlight, the character of Morwen came to my mind. So she's the wife of Hurin and the mother of Turin. And so this is a Silmarillion story. But every step of her story is so difficult for her. And I admire her a lot because she made some really, really difficult and sacrificial decisions for her children to protect them as best as she could. And even though ultimately her story ends in tragedy, you can follow the love that she does have for her children throughout the entire tale, all the way up until her own death. Um, so it's sad. It's definitely sad, but she has a lot of strength as a mother. And you can see her putting her own children kind of ahead of her. Like, as a mom myself, the thought of having to send my children away for their own safety is like, devastating for me because of how much I would miss them. And, I wouldn't want them to grow up without me. But her ability to do that when she sees it's necessary, I think is really heroic. And it also, the way that she is able to make such big sacrifices does remind me of Tolkien's own mother, how he kind of saw her as a martyr for her faith because of how soon she died after her own conversion and kind of like the conditions she was subjected to because of she was doing what she felt was right. So, I mean, I don't think that they were meant to reflect each other, but I think that there is a similarity there in the sacrifice that she's willing to make for her children.
Yeah, very well said. And I wonder too if some of that was influenced by his experience in war in both World War I and World War II, because his mother had passed by the time World War I, and he saw so many people, so many children of mothers die and mothers who lost their children, or in World War II having, as you said, having the children sent away into the countryside, away from the populated cities, like in Chronicles of Narnia.
Mm-hmm.
So he definitely kind of saw that, a lot of that in his own in the world.
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely he was definitely influenced by that. So very
Yeah.
cool. All right. Well, let's see who I will go with. Thomas Sanjurjo, you go next. Who's your favorite
right.
mother?
I'm going to cheat and I'm going to choose a whole race of mothers. And I'm going to go with the Entwives.
Yay!
The Entwives are just so interesting to me because like the Ents are mourning their loss and at the same time don't really seem interested in going to find them. Like it's this weird dichotomy that's going on with the Ents. But for anybody who doesn't know, the story is essentially that the Ent wives became interested in growing smaller things. They vegetables and grasses and things that were much more manageable, like a garden essentially. And so they pursued that, and the Ents pursued growing great forests and trees and became obsessed with it. And so the two split very early on, like before men learned agriculture, before hobbits learned agriculture. And that's actually where the men and the hobbits learn the agriculture from, is from the Entwives. So the Entwives teach them how to develop the land and how to grow things. And I just think this is a really interesting look at, like that men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing. But, like tree men are interested in growing big trees, and tree women are interested in growing gardens. And and it's just that domesticity versus the kind of hubris of the Ents trying to grow these large forests. It's such a neat like dichotomy that adds a flavor to like who the Ents are as they're talking to Merry and Pippin, and kind of unraveling their story to us as the reader, into the hobbits. It's really it's a neat it's the one that I always think of when I think of mothers in Lord of the Rings, because I know we never really get we never really hear about them being mothers, or like how an Ent has offspring. But it's just interesting to me that they're lost, and so the Ents cannot continue on because what would be mothers are now all, gone somewhere else that the Ents don't know about.
Yeah, very cool. I wonder if we'll maybe even see something like that in the Rings of Power, because I think there's been some speculation out there that we could see Ent wives or getting some more of that. So maybe we'll get something, even though it's not from the professor himself, but we'll see.
I'm up for it. I think it'd be interesting.
I don't know. I mean, so I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but I was reading The Fall of Numenor, and if they're going to follow the story of The Fall of Numenor, I would think that we might see something happening with the Endwives. But I guess you never know.
Should be in there somewhere.
They should be. They should be in there somewhere.
All right. And then Thomas Salerno, who is your favorite mother?
Okay, so this character, readers may know from the Silmarillion, but she's kind of become my new favorite mother of the Legendarium, because I just finished recently rereading the Fall of Gondolin book. And so I'm going to name Idril Celebrimbor, who is the daughter of the High King of the Noldor, Turgon, and she is also the wife of the man Tuor, and their son is Eärendil, who is, of course, the father of Elrond and Elros. So she's kind of the foremother of this great lineage. But what's awesome about her is that, like, when she plays a really prominent role in the Fall of Gondolin story, like, she's not kind of I mean, it's funny because, like, she's the princess of this great realm, but she's in no way a damsel. When there's worry that the city might be under siege one day by Morgoth, she's the one who takes charge and tells her husband, look, we should be trying to make preparations for this eventuality. We should try and have a plan of escape because we don't know what might happen. And so she spearheads this whole plan to have there be a secret tunnel that leads out of the city. And during the actual battle, during the sack of the city, she puts on armor and bears a sword and actually fights to protect her home and her son, both because Tuor is on the front lines manning the walls with the other warriors, but she's at home, protecting it both from the orcs and from the lackeys of the traitor Maeglin, who come to, it's because, like, he tries to kidnap her and Eärendil, but again, she's not a damsel. She defends herself. And I love there's this great moment when she meets Tuor during the sack of the city, and, like, he's desperately trying to find her, and she appears there, like, on in a square that he makes his way to, and it describes her as tall as a warrior. And he goes into detail about her armor and the sword that she has, and I just thought that was really cool. It was very kind of Eowyn-esque, but in an elf kind of way, to have this great elf warrior princess was, I thought, something really unique in the Legendarium, and the fact that she helps protect her son. If it weren't for Idril, there wouldn't have been that exodus from Gondolin of people who survived and able to carry on the legacy of that great city, and that ultimately led through Eärendil to the Valar coming to Middle Earth to deal the final blow to Morgoth. So I think she's a rather unsung heroine because you don't hear her name a lot, and even even fans of the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion might either not know her or know a whole lot about her. But I think that Idril needs more spotlight. So I just wanted to talk about her.
Yeah, she sounds really cool. Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. Yeah, it's you saying that. I'm just imagining Galadriel from Rings of Power, like armored,
right? Yeah,
armored, fearsome elf warrior princess. So it definitely could be some. There's definitely parallels there, whether intentional or not. I don't know, but yeah, very cool. Well, I'll go ahead and shout out mine, and I don't know if she's my favorite, but I just found this kind of interesting and was in mind. So I'm going to pick, or I've picked Aragorn's mother, Gilraine. So for those who may not know, her story is more in the appendices of The Lord of the Rings. after Aragorn's father, Arathorn, is killed, she brings him to be raised in Rivendell. And then she kind of goes back to her people, the Dunedain of the North, who kind of are living in the woods and don't really probably have much of a stable home. And she dies shortly before the Lord of the Rings, but not before she says, "I gave hope to the Dunedain, and I kept none for myself." Which, for those who may not have read the appendices but have seen Lord of the Rings, the films, that line may sound familiar, and it's because in the movie it's attributed to Elrond, who says, "I give hope to men," and Aragorn says, "I keep none for myself." So I hadn't really thought about that, but they kind of put her little bit of story into Aragorn in the film, and kind of thinking about that, she's almost kind of a Marian figure in that she gives up her son to be king, but obviously in different ways because she does not live to see the victory of her son. And then I believe in the film as well, there's a shot of Aragorn kind of in front of a statue that almost looks like a Marian statue.
Yeah.
It does. I remember that.
Yeah,
It does.
and so I don't remember if that's in like the flashback when he and Arwen are younger and he's first kind of leaving to go journey with the Dunedain, or if it's when they're in Rivendell after escaping the Black Riders. But yeah, there's a little bit of Marian parallel there, which we, as we've kind of discussed, Tolkien definitely knew what he was doing with some Marian connections with the fall of Barad-dûr and being the same day as the Annunciation. So there could be a little bit of parallel there, or maybe I'm just reading into it. But that's who I wanted to highlight. So unless anyone has anyone else or anything to say about her, we kind of have made a list of other ones here. So
I just wanted to mention real quick that Gilrain has. I like when Aragorn confides in her that he's met this beautiful elf woman, and Arwen, and he's smitten, and she says to him, "My son, your aim is high." Even for the descendant of many kings. But she kind of explains to him, like, maybe your aim's a little bit too high, but of course that just makes him want to pursue this even more. But I just like that moment. It's very human. It's very real.
That's so cute.
Yeah.
Typical mom stuff of mom of a son.
She doesn't want him to get his heart broken, right? She's like,
right, yeah.
She's like, maybe you could find a nice human woman.
Right?
Maybe a nice girl from Rohan.
Right?
Let's not get into like shipping wars.
All right. Well, guess we can keep on moving. So we had a couple more on the list. So if no particular order, we kind of have touched on Galadriel several times. So maybe now would be a good time to bring her up as kind of as y'all kind of said, she's kind of a motherly figure, but maybe in a more of a terrifyingly matriarchal kind of a mother figure. But in a lot of ways, she is kind of a mother to the Fellowship, as well as kind of all the free peoples of Middle Earth, because she's kind of she's one of the last remaining. She's one of the highest elves. She's kind of a leader of the effort against Sauron, and is the only kind of female to be there. So she's kind of a mother in that sense. She's like the mother of the revolution in a way. But I don't know if anyone had anything you want to say about Galadriel as a mother, because we do have her daughter on this list as well. So if anyone has any thoughts about Galadriel first.
I just had this really cute thought that she's kind of like, she's almost like that mom who packs a surprise in your backpack for when you go to school. Because she's like, here you go. Here's some things you're going to need on your journey. And don't forget to take this. It's like, I just had this. Yeah. I just
here's your coat.
Right.
Don't forget your light. This is really important.
She's like
It's like
that
an artifact
mom
from the
who
first
makes,
age, but hold on to this.
yeah, she makes sure you have everything you need.
Yes. She equips the peoples of Middle Earth.
And even things they don't think they'll need, like she gives Sam, here's a seed, and he
Mm-hmm.
and Gimli gets hair and various things. So, but of course they do need them, or they become kind of great treasures to them. So as in those gifts. So and yeah,
Mhm.
I'm curious to see in the Rings of Power if we'll see kind of any development of her as a young mother, like because we kind of really don't know if her husband and Arwen are, if Arwen's around yet. I think in the timeline she should be. I could be wrong on that.
I mean, Celebrian.
Oh yeah, sorry, not Arwen. Yeah. So okay, yeah. So
Yeah, that's going to
I'm-
be a weird, not to get too far into Rings of Power, but I really don't know how they're going to write themselves out of that.
Eh.
But we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. I'm along for it. I'm gonna give them grace. I feel like they are making, out of the elves, they are making much more human characters. I know that's bizarre to say, but like these characters that are very long lived also have very interesting lives with very, like they're able to kind of move away from something for a long time and then come back to it as an anchor point. And I actually like that for her. I think that's an interesting thought for her. And I would like to see it. I would like to see them honor the actual story as we know it unfolds. But I don't mind them putting their own spin on it. So I'm intrigued to see where that goes, for sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of imagining her. She's looking when she's talking to Aragorn in Lord of the Rings and book or movie, whatever. She's kind of looking back and how she knew Isildur and Elendil, and how she kind of was shepherding Numenor along in a lot of ways. So, we'll kind of, because we can kind of see some seeds of, if she hadn't gone to Numenor, they probably wouldn't. They may not have returned to Middle Earth, and the whole story may not have happened in that way. So if we kind of keep those as canonical or semi-canonical, we can kind of see there's some, she's drawing on her experience when she's with Aragorn in the future. So
It'll be interesting to see how she develops as a mother character. Because yeah, again, we saw a little bit of that side of her when she's with Theo, and she's kind of keeping him, she's giving him wise advice, and is telling him how to protect himself and keep himself safe. But it's like, yeah, I want to see more of that. I want to see more of her, because like because of the storyline of this season, like we just see her like go do stuff, and we didn't get as many quiet introspective moments with her, and the ones that we did get were some of my favorite moments of the season. So it'll be interesting to see Galadriel kind of grow into that role, and I think there's a lot of potential there, because yeah, as you said, Thomas, these are beings that live so long that like their accumulated wisdom and knowledge over the centuries, yeah, it just must make them have just a completely different outlook from normal people. And I hope they explore more of that.
yeah, very cool.
I think importantly for her too, she's the mother of the forest, right? So she's by the time we see her in the actual Lord of the Rings books, she's settled down, and has a place that she is in charge of and cares for, and you see that she won't leave. Like she's not going to go and participate in this particular cycle of the ring, but that's because she has a home that she's responsible for, and you see her a lot more settled in that. And I like that. And I hope they really tie those two things together from the Rings of Power. This, like, the young mother or the young woman going out into the world to make a name for herself, as opposed to the woman who's settled into this domesticity that's equally important as all of the adventure that she's been through, and impactful and significant in a different way.
And I also just thought of there's the angle of Galadriel as grandmother, because we know from, especially from the tale of Aragorn and Arwen, that Arwen spent a lot of time with Galadriel over the centuries, so it's like Galadriel definitely had a hand in raising her granddaughter, because as I'm sure we'll get into later, her own daughter, Arwen's mother, couldn't really be present. So she kind of took over that mother role for her granddaughter. And I know that, in real life, there are families where that is the situation, where the grandparents kind of have to pick up, either because, the parents can't be there or they've died. And so I think that's an interesting side of Galadriel's character too, Galadriel as grandmother.
Very cool. Well, I think we can use that as to go right into not Arwen, but Galadriel's daughter, Celebrian. So, or Celebrian. I apologize for not knowing how to pronounce that correctly. But didn't anyone want to kind of share who she is and her importance with the story?
Well, yeah, it's like she's interesting because you don't really. I believe she's mentioned like maybe once in the whole Lord of the Rings. I think there's a lot more about her in the appendices, where she's the daughter of Galadriel and Celeborn, and in the Second Age, she marries Elrond, and she's the mother of the twin sons Elladan and Elrohir, and Arwen, and the gist of her story is that she actually gets captured by orcs at one point. I believe she's traveling between Lorien and Rivendell through the Misty Mountains. She's captured by orcs. She's given a poisoned wound. She's tortured. And her sons, Elladan and Elrohir, actually go out and do this whole daring thing to rescue her, which there's sparingly little details about, but that sounds like it would be a pretty intense story if there was, I don't know, some lost manuscript. if like on my list of like lost Tolkien manuscripts to find, if there's one of that story, I would definitely like to see it. But although Elrond, who's kind of a master of healing, was able to, I guess, remove the poison from her, it was almost like Frodo's wound. It kind of left its mark, and she couldn't find any more joy in Middle-earth. So she ends up sailing off to Valinor. So again, there's this theme in Middle-earth of mothers who either pass on or leave. And so Arwen and the twins are kind of left without a mother figure. Except for, obviously, their grandmother, Galadriel, as I mentioned earlier.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely tragic for sure. Yeah, maybe that, I don't know if the timeline would match it, but maybe that's in a future spin-off of Rings of Power or something, or in Rings of Power, we could maybe see something like that as a, as like a side, like every episode of whatever spin-off is like its own thing. Kind of like the Lost Tales of of Rings of Power or something. So definitely a possibility here. That would be very cool. Well, I didn't know if we have a few more on here. I don't know if we would want to discuss, since we're kind of in the elvish world. I don't know if we want to just keep on with talking about, we have Elwing, who was the mother of Elrond and Elros, who are important to not only the canonical Tolkien, but into Rings of Power. So I don't know if anybody wanted to discuss anything about her specifically. She has a pretty interesting story.
Sure, I can talk about her for a little bit. I think she's a really neat character. So basically, her story is that she is married to Eärendil, and kind of after the fall of Gondolin, he's kind of going on his little journeys, and then there's a period of time where he's gone, and the sons of Feanor come and they want the Silmaril back. And I'm fuzzy on all the details. It's been a while since I read it, but she ends up casting herself into the sea with the Silmaril. And instead of dying, Ulmo like bears her up out of the water, and she turns into a bird. And then she flies with the Silmaril to Eärendil and they're reunited. And then she goes along with him on his voyage. And then she ends up staying with him. She gets to live in a little tower where she can fly as a bird at times. And then she can kind of see him as he's in his ship sailing as a star. And I'm realizing, if you're unfamiliar with the story,
how wacky that sounds.
How wacky that, yeah.
But you're talking like this is like the ultimate power couple in all of Tolkien, right? Because you've got the son of Tuor and Idril, and then the daughter or the granddaughter, right, of Beren and Luthien. So like these are and Huor's and Arendil's line. So it's like this is like the who's who. These two are like the, everybody connects to these two, and the story really is. And then from them, it kind of goes out also into connecting to just about everybody else as well. So if you wanted to pick like two characters that were meant to be together, it would be these two. And like that kind of ties the bow on the whole Lord of the Rings thing.
Yeah, and they're children. They have two sons, Elrond and Elros, and from Elros comes all of Numenor, and then from Elrond, you can follow his story through the Lord of the Rings, and he's a major player. So from these two characters, like they have arguably like the coolest adventure that a couple could ever go on, and then from the two of them, their descendants have like a massive impact on the world.
Yeah, their adventure is pretty cool. It's pretty comparable to Beren and Luthien's, but I mean, and even Luthien kind of turns into a bat, or takes the form of a bat, or wears a bat cape or something along those lines in their adventure to get the Silmaril from Morgoth. So I guess if you can fly you're going to be important if you can fly. So what we're seeing, but
birds are important.
And all right. And unless anyone had anything else to say about Elwing, I'm sure we could talk a lot about her. But if no one else, I guess we're kind of moving out of the elves a little bit. We mentioned Arwen, but we just don't know much about her as a mom. Just other than that, she had a long life, and we can assume was a good mom. But if anyone had any details or anything they wanted to share about her before we move on to another one. Yeah, there's not too much. There's not like the biography of Arwen after the Lord of the Rings. It's kind of she's kind of, not to say she's shortchanged, but she kind of was maybe shortchanged a little bit in terms of we just don't know, don't get much of her outside of her relationship to Aragorn. So, but at least in the films, one thing I'm thinking of is she saw that she was going to leave Middle Earth and with her father, and then she had a vision that she saw a son, and she saw her Aragorn dying and thought, oh no, I'm it's going to be, my life will end, and I love Aragorn, but he'll be gone, and then I'll die. But then she saw she had would have a son with him, and in the films, at least, that kind of was the catalyst for her to stay. Which again, I know is not the not from the books, but just that's a little bit more there. So we can kind of extrapolate that from that a little bit, that she was motherhood was important to her. And she saw that as like that was a life. That was life for her. Even though she would give up eternal life or immortality, she would have another kind of life. Which I'm not a mom, but I know even as a dad, you're like, when you have kids, you have another part of your life out there in the world, and it can be tough sometimes to want to always protect them and keep them from harm, but also. So I don't know if anyone wanted to say anything more about her as a mom.
I like the little snippet we get in the movie too of her father speaking to her about what's going to happen, where she's going to have to watch him fade away and die, and she'll just keep going. And that's a very good observation. And when you extrapolate who it's coming from and the relationships that he's had and who he's been around, it's very interesting to like see that perspective of it and how he's kind of passing that to her. But then that it was so important to her, the connection that she had with Aragorn and the fact that she was going to have a son and that there was going to be this line that was going to carry on from her, that she decided to stay and not leave and go and just be separate from the world, but to actually be a part of it, even with all of the tragedy. And that's an interesting, that's an interesting take a lot of times when you think about motherhood and the fact that you have children and eventually you have to let them go and you have to see them pass on to be their own people. And that's, as a father, it's hard. As a mother, my wife's always telling me, you don't even know. You don't even know how challenging this is. It's completely different for you than it is for me. So I can imagine that that's something that's really, for her would be even more interesting, is like having to watch multiple generations, if she stuck around for it, for them to be passing on and becoming great, but at the same time to be fading out of the world in front of her. And she was brave enough to do that. That's impressive.
Oh, very cool. Very well said. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that as like how much she gave up, and she could have been kind of the Galadriel to the next generation of Middle Earth if she wanted to, but she gave it up to bring forth life in a different way. So we just had a couple more on here. I don't know. I think Thomas, you put on here. We have one or two more positive mothers, and we might have a few negative mothers or mother figures to touch on before we conclude. But did Thomas, you want to discuss Finduilas?
Yeah, Finduilas of Amroth is interesting because she is the mother of Boromir and Faramir, and Faramir was a character who Tolkien himself said he really identified with. So it was interesting to see yet again is another absent mother figure. We're told that she dies when both Boromir and Faramir are pretty young. I think Boromir's 10 and Faramir is 5, or somewhere along those ages. She seems to die of kind of depression, or maybe it's the black breath of the Nazgul. All that's said is that being like she's from Dol Amroth, this very coastal area near the sea, and of course it's Tolkien, so the sea has all these kind of spiritual connotations. And when she moves to be with her husband Denethor in Minas Tirith, the proximity to Mordor seems to almost drain the life and spirit out of her. And so she passes on at a young age. And it says not only does this affect the two boys, it kind of affects Denethor. That's when he starts to kind of become withdrawn from other people and cold. Where, okay, he wasn't always, he was never really a people person, Denethor, but it definitely got worse after his wife died, because she was like the one person who you could really say he genuinely really loved for her own sake. And with her gone, it kind of starts Denethor on that road to where we eventually see him in The Lord of the Rings, where he's completely self-obsessed and is willing to do, has this terrible relationship with his sons and is just willing to do anything, including using the Palantir to obtain knowledge that he thinks will help him. And of course, it leads to his undoing. And it just seems to all lead back to he never really got over the loss of Finduilas. And perhaps, and this is a little bit of speculation on my part, does he blame himself for bringing her away from the sea that she loved and bringing her to this place where he knew she wouldn't be able to thrive? Maybe he blames himself for that. And it just adds another layer to Denethor's character and to Boromir and Faramir.
Yeah, and it could be that she's kind of like, maybe it was like a political marriage where the Lord of Gondor needed to continue his line, and so we don't know, but it could be, hopefully they loved each other and it wasn't just for that, but it's kind of Game of Thrones esque, where you take someone from you take the woman from a happy place, and she has to go live in the north, in the cold north, or in the cold stone.
Yeah.
Maybe finding some happiness, but still not, as you said, thriving. And yeah, I think we kind of see Boromir took after his father, and Faramir took after her in a lot of ways. So, or maybe not took after, but was at least he was kind of more drawn to her, and maybe that's why Denethor kind of pushed him away more than he
Oh
did
yeah, I
Boromir,
hadn't
because
thought of that.
it's like it reminded he looked in, and almost like Harry Potter, you remind me of your mother. So
Uh,
Yep.
bring in
And
all the other
two-
fantasies.
yeah, right. And two, what is it? Faramir gives his mother's mantle to Eowyn.
Oh, yes. That's such a good
Mhm.
moment. That's
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah. It's beautiful.
Well, very cool. Well, unless anybody had any other good mothers to talk about, thought we could spend a few. I guess I did have on here. I wanted to touch on, at least in Rings of Power. It's again not canonical, but Bronwyn and the Harfoot mothers that we see.
Mhm.
And of course we talked a lot about Bronwyn as in her relationship with Theo and everything, but I think we can kind of see that as she was kind of maybe a little bit justice for moms in Middle Earth, and not in a bad way or anything, but just maybe that's like they kind of wrote her wrote her in, instead of a father, having Theo's father kind of be the one kind of taking care of him and being kind of the leader of this settlement, or kind of the leader of these people. It's Bronwyn. So I don't know if anyone we've talked a lot about her, of course, but if anyone had anything else to say, is I'm definitely curious to see how she develops in the next season and beyond.
Yeah, I think it'll be
Oh,
interesting to see
yeah.
what comes of Theo as well. Like, because
Yeah.
we now have not only the example of what I would say is a good mother. I think she's good in the sense of the setting that she's in, and trying to help him grow. But then to see, what that results in with her and with him and who he becomes, because that's
Ah.
still a sticking point for me. I'm still very intrigued at who Theo is going to end up being.
Well, we've seen he's tasted power and he likes it. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
hopefully he's going somewhere very evil.
Or maybe it could be that we think that, and then Bronwyn brings him back somehow
Brings him
from
back.
that.
And then Bronwyn becomes evil.
Ooh.
I need some very evil characters to be developed. I feel like we need enough happiness. The second age is not a happy time.
And after we spent all this time talking about the happy mothers in Middle Earth too.
Yeah, sorry. So far, the story that we know for Bronwyn up until this point, she's a really dedicated mom, and you can tell she's the kind of mom who's like, I will do anything to protect my family, and that's definitely very admirable.
Yeah, very cool. And the only other one I had written down from the show was the Harfoot mothers, who we see there's several kind of mother figures. There's Nori's mom, and then there's the
Marigold, right?
Yeah, and then I forget her name, but the wife of the head Harfoot. We kind of see her as she's kind of talking sense in her husband.
Died. Didn't she die, or was that his
Sadek's
second wife? Yeah.
Sadek's wife is who I'm talking about.
Didn't she pass away?
Well, or maybe not his wife, but wasn't there the one who was
There was those kind of two old ladies that
that's what I was
he
thinking
would
of.
speak to. Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember her name. Melva?
Malva is one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the other.
But they're kind of a little bit stereotypical, like old grandmother talking sense into everybody, and
yeah,
kind of keeping everybody on track when the young ones get too out of line. But they do kind of have their own little bit of heroism there when they help Nori and the stranger out. So we could touch on them a little bit. I'm curious. We'll see kind of where that story goes as well, as we get into the show. And unless anyone else has any happy mothers, like I said, I think we can move and spend a couple minutes on some kind of the bad mothers of Middle Earth. So, or mother figures, I guess.
Before I forget, is just that what was interesting to me is that Marigold was actually a stepmom to Nori, whereas her, you know, I'm forgetting the name of Nori's dad now, but his first wife had died. Largo, yeah, that's so Largo's first wife had died, and so Marigold was his second wife, and I believe that they do mention it a couple of times, but it's like I love how if they didn't mention that, you wouldn't know. You know, she's completely the mother of that family, which is in so many other fairy tales, it's the evil stepmother, you know. So it's like I like that they kind of undercut that. You know, she at the same time she's afraid for Nori, but in the end she's supportive of her, and I thought that was really great.
Definitely
very cool. Well, I think we can, as I said, move on to the bad mother section. So I just had a couple down here that and feel free to, we can bring up any others as we kind of start to wrap up. But the first one I wrote down was Ungoliant and to an extent Shelob. And for those who don't remember, for our listeners who may not remember, Ungoliant she was the first spider. She was a Maiar who Morgoth corrupted, or Melkor, I guess, corrupted, and took the form of a spider. And she's actually the one who killed the two trees by kind of grossly like biting them and injecting them with her venom and stuff. And her and of course her offspring became, you know, the big spiders of Middle Earth that the best we know of is Shelob. But so she's kind of a bad mother figure in the sense that, you know, she gets corrupted and spawns this whole race of kind of evil beings. And I think we can kind of say the spiders are not good. Are not good. Not really redeemable. But I don't know if anyone else wanted to say anything about her or Shelob or the spiders.
I'm intrigued at how prolific she is, because we see spiders not only in the realms of Mordor, but also in the forest, where in the Hobbit. And so those spiders, I'm assuming, are of the same stripe, but you know, we can't be sure. Maybe it's offspring of another of Ungoliant's offspring. But you know, it's just an interesting thought. Like, it's always there, and it's almost like you know, you can kind of tell how Tolkien felt about spiders by the way that they appear in Lord of the Rings.
I believe actually it says in the Two Towers very grossly that the Mirkwood spiders are the kind of inbred spawn of Shelob and her own other offspring, and that's really gross. And I'm like, Tolkien, why did you add that?
Tolkien's just gotta let you know how bad it is.
So it's like there's this really gross kind of, you know, just inbred, disgusting like aura about the spiders. Like, he just wanted to let you know there is nothing good about these things at all, you know. And that her mates that she created these lesser spiders with, she then devoured. And so it's like, and that's the thing, like the spiders, both Shelob and Ungoliant, are all about, it's funny because they're very, like you said, Thomas, they're very generative. They're always pumping out new spiders, but at the same time, they're all about consuming everything, whether it's the light of the two trees or other spiders, or, you know, Shelob just going after little hobbitses or whatever. It's like they're all about conspicuous consumption.
Kind of makes you wonder what Maiar was corrupted into. Like, what was that Maiar responsible for? And you know, their corruption into this perverted form, because there's always that theme of, like, you know, the corruption of a thing is a different expression of that same thing. So it's almost like the virtue becomes the vice. So I'm intrigued now. That would be a really interesting story to see, like,
Yeah.
to go back to Melkor and his creation and his or his, not his creation, but his corruption of the creation, and see what those pieces were. I'd like to see some flashbacks. There you go. There's some ideas for Rings of Power. Some flashbacks to how Morgoth made the things that he made.
And this is like, I'm totally just making this up, but wouldn't it be cool if they were Maiar of the Vala, who is the Weaver? Isn't that Vaire?
Oh, yeah.
Like, wouldn't that? I mean, like, I'm like, that's just completely, I have no foundation for that, but it would be really, I'm just going to go ahead and believe it until someone proves me wrong. But like the idea of spiders weaving, their own webs, and they're kind of using it towards evil. Maybe they learned weaving from Vaire. I don't know.
I'll buy that head.
I'm going for it.
That's a good headcanon. Yeah, and the only other thing with Ungoliant is I believe in the text of the Silmarillion it says something about how we don't know her ultimate fate, but we know that she basically disappeared and has an insatiable hunger for light, and so it's kind of I forget it. I wish I should have wrote down the line, but it's something like she's almost probably devouring herself, but can never die, or something along, or is always going to be hungry, but
it's something like she devoured herself in the end, or something. Like that.
Something like that. It's pretty gruesome.
That's very Greek mythology. That sounds like something. Yeah.
Well, that's what you get when you eat the light of the two trees, and nothing else can compare to that. So
that's what you get.
And then, well, the only other ones I have on here, I thought we could touch on Smeagol's grandmother, who I believe kind of, when Smeagol was, because I from what I remember, he was kind of not a good hobbit or hobbit-esque thing already when he found the ring, and then that just made him worse, and I believe it was Smeagol's grandmother, might have, and that might have only been partially because of her mistreatment of him. I don't remember as much about her. I don't know if anyone has anything to say, but I think ultimately she kind of drove him out of their their home, and before he made his way into the mountains and lived in the caves.
Yeah, I know Smeagol was definitely like a weird little guy before he even got the ring, because I think Tolkien says that he was really interested in roots and beginnings, and so he would just be like off digging holes and just like in general being strange. And he wasn't like a socially accepted kind of guy. But yeah, I'd have to go back and reread that to see what role his grandmother plays. But I do remember he gets basically like kicked out by her.
Yeah, because it says he started to use the ring to find out secrets and pit people against each other in their little village. It said he put his knowledge to crooked and malicious uses, which is just a great line. But
yeah,
and then and that his grandmother couldn't take all this infighting that Smeagol was causing, and so expels him from the family and turns him out. But it's funny because he kind of remembers her, because in his various little like monologues that he does with himself, he mentions her a few times.
Mm-hmm.
I think in one of the riddles with Bilbo, he figures out one of the answers by remembering his grandmother. And then when Gandalf interrogates him about the ring, he tries to use his grandmother to like construct this lie. Oh no, the ring came from my grandmother. It was hers, or something like that. And Gandalf's just like, I don't believe that for a second, but it's like she seemed to have left some imprint on Smeagol's mind, because he still remembers her even after 500 years of having the ring destroy his personality and consciousness. She still comes up. She must have been, a very influential figure in his life, even if they didn't see eye to eye and their relationship kind of deteriorated.
You wonder almost if she was able to prevent some level of his fall to the ring by the care that she instilled in him, because there's still like pieces of him that are, that are mortal, that are hobbit. I was going to say human, but that are hobbit, like that are there and conscious. And Frodo's able to bring that out of him a little bit. Not enough in the end, because it turns out in the end that he is just really evil. Like that's just who he is. But I like that he's this small evil. Like he's in the contrast of Sauron, the great evil, right? This is small evil, where it's like he uses the ring to find out secrets and create scandal. Like that's his, and that's but that is that it. But the thing about it is that that's evil. Like that's not. It's not just banal in the sense that like, oh, who cares? It's actually like it's evil in that sense of like banality is evil, right? That evil is just the everyday things that we do that are like, that are just bad, just rotten, and we need to seek to improve. And I love that that's this character, like from the beginning, so much so that someone like his grandmother has to kick him out because she just can't stand that this is what he does anymore.
It's almost like she was trying to get him to come to his senses. Maybe if I kick him out, he'll straighten up. But instead, he just took it so personally that, he kind of, everybody's against me. And so he turns in on himself, even though he's kind of the cause of his own problems.
Very good. Well, the last one we have on here is, I think we could just touch on for a moment, is Lobelia Sackville-Baggins, who was
again like the banal evil, right?
Yeah, but I feel sorry for her in the end because her son gets murdered, and yeah, he was pretty rotten too. But you can tell that, like, she had that kind of banality of evil in like the early chapters of Fellowship of the Ring, where she's so rude and so just kind of unpleasant. But, like she had it in her to sort of stand up to the ruffians, and to the point where they kind of like the other hobbits like her at the end. And she gives away her money to help, the Shire rebuild. And I thought that that was kind of a nice twist on that character. Like she does a complete 180 that you don't expect.
Yeah, she has a cool character arc. It's very minor. Like you wouldn't, you could blink and you'd miss it. But when you really think about it, the difference between her and the Fellowship versus the end of the Return of the King, it's pretty big.
Yeah, she's kind of one of the few mothers, and even one of the few kind of evil, semi-evil characters that has kind of that redemption in the end. And it's because usually if you start evil, you finish evil, or if you start good, you finish good. With a few other exceptions here and there, but yeah, that is interesting. I was kind of thinking more of her just because, again, I'm more of a film. I have seen the films a number of times. The only things you really see of her is she's trying to get back in from Bilbo, and he says, they've never forgiven me for living this long, because she wants that for her. Yeah, she wants that for for her family, for her son. So it's kind of, she's coveting her own family's stuff, in name to give it to her son, but because she wants it for herself. So, but at least in the book, as you mentioned, she gets that redemption in the end.
I believe at the end of the Hobbit book, Tolkien even says that she never legally recognized Bilbo as still alive. And as like she kept up the pretense that like he was an imposter or something, and she never legally recognized his return. And I'm like, that's really petty.
Hobbits, everyone idealizes hobbits, but hobbits can be petty. Like they get in your business, they'll hold a grudge, they're gonna be gossiping about you. Like they're not perfect.
I've always thought Hobbiton needs somebody like the Curie of Ars to just kind of come in and sweep out all this gossip and backbiting and all that stuff.
All right. Well, unless anyone else has anything else to say, I think that will do it for us on the Secrets of Middle-earth. So before we close out, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make this show possible, including Thomas A., Carl D., Michael K., Valcovius, and Rob G. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give help us to continue to create the Secrets of Middle-earth and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them at sqpn.com/give. So again, we want to wish all the mothers out there a happy Mother's Day. We'd love to hear from you and would know which mother in Tolkien is your favorite. And again, you can let us know at sqpn.com/middle-earth, on our Facebook page or on Twitter. Send an email to middle-earth@sqpn.com, or visit our channel on the StarQuest Discord server at sqpn.com/discord. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing fathers in the Legendarium. So might have a larger number to pull from there. So until then, Kaitlyn Fascista, thank you for joining me in the Secrets of Middle-earth.
Thank you.
And Thomas Salerno, thank you as well.
Thanks, Jeff.
And Thomas Salerno, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
And once again, I'm Jeff Haecker. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Middle-earth on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy. The Secrets of Technology. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/technology.